Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Stephen Gillen Crime Files. Today we're going to go into real darkness. We're going to go into the world of serial killers. Back in the late 70s, there was a serial killer that was terrifying in New York. He was murdering women mainly. He was picking his targets. They was parking in lovers' lanes. He was a very sadistic killer. He was a sexual predator. No one was safe. He terrorized, boroughs like Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan. Today, I have a ex-New York police detective who worked on this case, as well as many other cases. Someone who grew up in Alphabet City, in Manhattan's Lower East Side, among many other mob figures, and worked on many iconic cases. He has a lot of controversial stuff to give us, which hasn't really been put out in the public domain. He has a riveting story, so much so it's been put around the world and is very, very coveted. Coming next. Welcome back. My guest today is Michael Codella. Michael, welcome onto the platform.
Stephen, thank you for having me.
Now, you've got a riveting story. You really have. Son of Sam, there was, you kind of knew there was another killer involved in that. We've had cases that was even stopped by the New York NYPD because of some of your work. You've got a lot of historical, controversial content to give. But where did it start for you, Mike? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Brooklyn, Canarsie, Brooklyn.
What was that like? What was the environment like in your family at that time?
Canarsie is a little bit of a different kind of neighborhood. You had a lot of civil service workers, but you also had a lot of mob-connected guys, made members of the 5 crime families here in New York City. So it was a little kind of a strange atmosphere. Like I said, you had a lot of civil service living right next door to mobsters. So it was a kind of a wild dynamic, actually.
And what was your own, just for audiences out there, what was your own upbringing like?
Well, I came from a middle-class family. Most of my friends were from similar backgrounds. And then some of my friends, their fathers were connected guys or made members of crime families. So it was, like I said, it was an interesting childhood and interesting growing up in that neighborhood.
So you could have went either way, Mike, right?
Like a lot of guys, there comes a time where you have to make a decision. Something happens where it kind of triggers whether you're going to go left or right. And I consider myself lucky. I went to the correct path, so to speak.
That's fascinating, and we're going to get into that more later on about some of the organized crime figures of the day and some of the stuff that happened in your life. I certainly know you have some stories to tell, but we're going to go straight into the raw content first. Now, you went on, to be a detective, serve your community. Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, was a massive case in them days. There was a lot of satanic connotations about the case. So tell us about your first look into that case and how you came to be involved in that case.
Well, David Berkowitz, according to the police or according to official reports, acted alone in killing 7 people and wounding, I believe, 6. And this was back in the summer of 76 and into 77. And in July of 77, the NYPD makes an arrest of this individual who they believed was the only shooter and the only killer, who called himself, according to NYPD, the son of Sam. And his name was David Berkowitz. For many years, well, when Berkowitz got arrested, he basically said that he acted alone and he acted on the orders of his neighbor's dog. Basically, what he was saying was he was unstable mentally. And the NYPD ran with it. The newspapers ran with that story that he was a lone sadistic killer who was obviously mentally unfit or unstable. After he got arrested, sometime afterwards, a few years later, actually, he turned the story around and he said, look, I didn't act alone. My neighbor's dog didn't tell me to kill people. I did this with other people.
Yeah, I mean, the son of Sam comes from where he said it was a demonic possession. It was my neighbor's dog telling me to kill these people. But then in 1990, he switches it around and he talks about it was actually a satanic cult. And this is what it was about, murdering all these people. Now, but to go back, what was your role in this case, Mike?
Well, it was many years after Berkowitz was arrested. Like I said, he was arrested in 77, and I was a kid at that time. I was maybe 13 years old. Fast forward to 1996, 97, I'm a police sergeant in the Detective Bureau, and I receive a call from an inmate in Attica State Prison. This inmate tells me on the telephone that he has information. Initially, he didn't mention Berkowitz or that particular cult. What he gives me is information. What he says to me is that he has information regarding an individual, a little boy that was abducted off the streets of Manhattan, the Soho area of Manhattan, and that abduction happened in 1979. The individual on the phone who I was speaking to, who had called me from Attica, said that he had direct information on that particular case. When he gave me the kid's name who was abducted, it was a worldwide case. It was the case that actually began putting little kids' faces on milk containers, missing kids on milk containers. President Reagan called it Missing Persons Day, May 25th, which was the day the little boy was abducted, and President Reagan made May 25th National Missing Children's Day. In any event, at some point I have to go to Attica and speak to this individual about the missing case, the missing child rather, and that's when I get information regarding Berkowitz, son of Sam cult, and the missing child connection.
Now, thanks for that, Mike. Now that there's a lot out there, and I know people that are actually more aware of these kind of things these days, or these kind of things that actually go on, very, very dark stuff. So what was your feeling about that, and how did that translate into the case that you was working at that time?
Well, so I had to go up to Attica to meet this individual. When I went, I brought a detective with me, one of my detectives who was working for me, and we went up to Attica. And the correctional officers were reluctant to actually let us speak to this guy because he had a violent criminal history. He was violent in the jail. He was 350, 400 pounds, and he was just a bad dude. So, and he apparently never got visitors. So the correctional officers initially didn't even were trying to talk us out of going to see this guy, in an enclosed area, because they didn't know how dangerous he could be. And which he was, a dangerous individual. He was actually in jail on a separate sodomy case where he had sodomized and had sexual relations with his infant daughter. So that's the kind of person I'm dealing with. So right off the bat, you know that the guy he's not right upstairs, and he's not the kind of people we normally deal with in everyday life. So I had to go up there and I spoke to him, and that's when he laid out this kind of elaborate case where, like I said, with the cult that Berkowitz was involved with, which is alleged to be the process church of the final judgment, and this missing kid, and the other shooters that Berkowitz was associated with, how it all kind of meshed together.
Now, we're going to go deeper into that. So what did you believe at that point? Did you think he was credible, apart from his, really bad character, has to be said, and his mental problems? Did you think he was credible with what he was saying?
A couple of things struck me as being credible kind of right off the bat. When he initially called me at the detective office, he didn't even give me the correct name of the kid that he was talking about, the abducted child. The name was a little, not only mispronounced, but, for lack of a better term, he mispronounced the kid's name. Now, if you're going to reach out to an individual like myself, a detective sergeant in the NYPD, and you're going to tell him you have information on a missing child, a missing person, whatever case it is, you would have your ducks in a row and know the kid's name or the person's name, so as not to allow the sergeant to believe you're making it up or you didn't have any indication what you were talking about. The fact that he didn't have the name 100% correct, I felt, gave him some credibility.
An indication of credence.
Yes, right. And then once we got up there, he gave a lot of information that was verified, that, through our investigations along the, within the next following months, allowed us to see that he had some credible information.
So, right, this guy, you go to Edgar Mike, he's disturbed big time. They don't even want you to go into close space with him because he's so disturbed, violent, all of this stuff. But you verified a lot of the stuff with this guy. So tell us can you talk about this guy's name? Can you tell us actually what this guy was like and how you felt in his presence?
Sure. So, in life, sometimes you meet people that are just pure evil.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just life, whether you're talking about guys on the street that have done things or wherever, business people that have stolen millions of dollars. Sometimes you just meet people that are pure evil. And again, I knew this guy's background. I had run his sheep before I went up to see him. I knew what he was arrested for. He was, at the time, a vice president of a motorcycle gang, a 1%er gang. So I knew what he was capable of. But all that aside, just going in and meeting this individual, whose name, by the way, was John Lentini, just going in and meeting him and looking him in the eye, you knew that evil exists. Let me just say that. You see this guy, you look at him, and you see nothing but an evil individual.
Now, you would have seen a lot of evil in your time, with your career. It's such a very active place, a lot of murders. So have you seen evil a lot in your career like that?
Like I said, you see, there's, I guess, like in anything else, I guess there's different levels of how evil a person can actually be. Cold-hearted killers, people who are sadistic. This guy, John Lentini, whose nickname, by the way, was Tiny, because he was 350 pounds, obviously they nicknamed him Tiny. Knowing his dealings with a child and sexual perversion that was running through his brain and his heart, and the evil that he inflicted on this little girl, there's not many people as evil or as sadistic as this person was.
Yeah, so you doing the really intense job that you did for so long at such a senior level, how would you discern evil? How would you know to discern about, I mean, there are different degrees of this, but what would you look for, and what would be the indications that would tell you this is a real one and this guy is very dangerous or very evil?
I mean, the way his matter of fact and nonchalant attitude towards not only what he has seen regarding the cult and regarding homicides that he's seen and participated in, but even in the fact of what he was in jail for, he kind of like blew it off as like nonchalant, like, yeah, so what? It is what it is, and that's what I am. And he didn't make any bones about it. He didn't pretend to be a nice guy who got caught on a bad rap, or he didn't give me any of that. Basically, I'm a scumbag, and this is my life, and this is the way I intend to be. And that, he was forthright in that respect. So, I mean, to me, that's as evil as you can get.
Yeah. So, we're talking about no redemption, no shame, no a sociopath. A sociopath in every sense of the word. So, how did you deal with that when you were there with this guy? And how was the son of Sam and this sadistic cult revealed through your meeting with this guy at Attica?
So basically what he had to tell us was that he was a member, or actually the vice president at the time, of a particular motorcycle gang called the Rat Pack. And he was contracted to do security outside these mansions up in Yonkers and Westchester, New York. And what was going on inside these mansions was sex, drugs, rock and roll, and satanic worship and satanic sacrifices. And what he would do as his for his money, basically, or what he was contracted to do was bring his guys up there, secure the area, make sure no cops came. If cops did come, they were to keep the cops out, the bikers, at any cost, whether that meant shooting, fighting, at any cost, keep the cops out. And just to keep any people that weren't invited away from the mansions, away from these parties. That's how he got initiated into this cult. Eventually, he becomes friendly with the cult members and the high priest and some of these individuals, and they invite him in, him and one of the other members of the bike gang. And he fits right in because what's going on in there? Drugs, wild sex. And he wasn't so sophisticated as to know what was going on with the satanic stuff initially, but that comes very easy to him because evil's right up his alley, right? Eventually, he actually becomes a high priest, according to him, in this cult. But prior to that, on one of the occasions that they brought him in, what he says is that he's standing in the background and the house has an altar made, and there's some satanic priests or witches, whatever you want to call them, and they call up the little boy to the front of the altar. They do some kind of ritual where they measure the kid with some kind of rope and some other stuff, and then they lay the kid down on the altar where presumably they were going to sacrifice him. Now, tiny John Lentini takes himself away from the scene at the exact moment the kid's supposedly going to get executed or sacrificed, to Satan. So he takes himself away from the scene so he doesn't see that, according to him, which is something a lot of bad guys do anyway. They take themselves away just for culpability factors. They take themselves away from the actual crime.
No, this is shocking. This is absolutely shocking. For viewers out there, they're going to say, that's a horror movie times 20. So for you, as a senior New York PD, NYPD detective, was there evidence to verify what this guy was saying And how did you verify this extraordinary stuff he's telling you?
So this particular incident was very hard to verify because, according to him, number one, the other biker that he had come into the and seen this incident with had passed away already. So many individuals whose names he gave us, they actually lived in the area, but they were also gone, either dead or just unattainable. So this particular incident was not easy to verify. With that said, what we did is we told him, look, because now you got to remember, Tiny wasn't helping us out of the goodness of his heart. Tiny was helping us, actually working or going to work to alleviate or to lessen his jail time. He was looking for parole, probation, whatever it was. And he could tell us 100 great stories, but unless we could get something going with it, an arrest or deeper into the investigation, he wasn't going to get out of jail anytime sooner. So what we told him, obviously, was after checking this out and not coming up with any names that could verify this, or he gave us another case that would lend credibility to himself, right? So he gave us two or three actually, but one of the cases he gave us was of a female. So the way the story goes is there was a female that hung around the biker gang that was also getting into the satanic stuff. Because now you got to remember, at some point, Tiny becomes infatuated with this cult and Satan and all of that stuff. Even aside from what he had seen and all the security stuff, this was now his thing, so to speak. So there's a female that was hanging around with him and his bikers, and it was winter time, and there was a park called Forest Hill Park, and they told the female that they wanted to do a satanic blessing on her. And what they actually did was they laid her on one of those cement tables that they have like checkerboards, and they're all over the parks here in New York. One of those cement tables. They laid her on the table. They had a big heavy sword that was like from the Renaissance period, without a sharp blade. Actually, a dull blade, but it was a very heavy duty sword and big. And they laid her on this table, and they did all of this connotations and all that stuff. When they were finished with it, she thought she was just going to be bled, meaning they were just going to take some blood from her. And what they actually do was, or what they actually do is, they take the sword, and when she thinks she's only going to get blessed with it, they crash it down on the center of her chest, killing her instantly. Now, he had told us the approximate year because he couldn't give us the exact year. He gave us the approximate year. He did give us the park, and he gave us the approximate month, meaning winter. There was snow on the ground and that kind of stuff. Well, it took us a long time to find the case because after so many years, the police precincts had changed their boundaries. Records get lost. It's all on paper. Back then everything was on paper. It took us a long time to find the case. Well, we find the case of a DOA female in the park, unidentified at the time, with a tattoo on her back, which years ago was unusual. And Tiny has said the girl had a tattoo of her son on her back, which is what she had. And the first person on the police report who was spoken to as the last person who had seen her was not Tiny, but the other biker who was involved with the satanic cult, the president of the bike gang.
And she was killed in the same way, autopsy report.
The autopsy said that her chest cavity was crushed by a blunt object.
Right. Well, this is, that's very conclusive evidence now. So what did you do with this guy then? You followed the trail. Did you go back to Attica then? And how did the Son of Sam case link reveal itself, going way back to this really sadistic serial killing spree of the late 70s, which terrorized New York? right? Very iconic case. How did it go back to that then? How did you find that it linked back?
Well, Tiny had said that these are the same individuals that were involved with David Berkowitz.
David Berkowitz, yeah.
Yeah, and he said that this is the same cult, and he had actually said that when he first, now you got to remember, the incident with the child that he saw happened in around 79. Berkowitz was doing the shootings in around 76, 77.
Mm.
And he had said that that's when he actually started the security. And he said he had run into Berkowitz. He didn't know him, but he had run into him, proving, or at least alleging, that that was obviously the same gang or the same cult.
The same group. So, I mean, here's the question as well, Mike. So this guy in Attica, right, what was his incentive for telling you this stuff?
Well, like I said, his incentive was to get out of, he wanted to get out of jail on parole or probation. He wanted to get out of jail earlier.
He was selling information. He wanted to sell the information to save his own skin, basically, right?
Yeah,
so,
I mean, he was willing to do, he was, like I said, he was actually working hard to get himself out.
All right. So this is, and of course, for the viewers out there who may not know the process of this kind of thing, you're going to want everything, obviously, in that trade, and you're going to need, it's not a fairy story. You need to validate that it's credible information that he's giving you that's worthy of you actioning anything to go to your superiors for there to be or not to be or possibly to be any deal with anyone for them, any exchange of this kind of thing for freedom, information or anything. Is that right?
Correct. He was willing, basically he was willing to give up anybody, which he did. He gave us actually a member of his own biker gang. He was willing to give up anybody to help himself get out of the camp, basically.
Yeah. Now, so what did you think, it had to be said, about uncovering this? What was your feelings about this when you started then putting the threads together? And there's a lot of evidence linked here that showing you these very dark things, Mike.
Initially it's kind of hard to believe that this actually exists in New York or anywhere in the world, for that matter. That people actually thrive on this kind of thing. But speaking to Tiny, you get to realize that there are people that actually buy into this whole satanic being the way kind of way of life. And like I said, if you could put a face on evil, Tiny would be the guy, and he would know, and he would explain. Let me tell you something about Tiny, which I hadn't thought about till very recently, actually. Tiny was a street guy, wasn't a book person. He didn't come across like some inmates who are bright and they just get caught up in a life, and that's it. He didn't seem like that at all. He was a street person, and he knew what, he knew that's the only life he knew, basically. But he had given us information back then, just like, because he would talk so much that stuff would come out of his mouth. I'd actually have to slow him down